Hello, everyone, and welcome. We'll get started in just one moment as we wait for folks to file into the room. Wonderful. We'll wait maybe 30 more seconds. I see some other participants joining, and then we'll go ahead and get started so that we can save quite a bit of time for questions and answers at the end. All right, I think we'll go ahead and get started. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today as we offer a question and answer period and explore some frequently asked questions that we've heard so far for our funding opportunity, Nourishing Next Generation Agri-Food Breakthroughs Innovation Challenge. Next slide, please. So the purpose of our call today is that our challenge has been open for a few weeks now, and we wanted to give folks the opportunity that are interested in applying or in the process of applying to ask more in-depth specific questions, share some frequently asked questions that we've heard to date, and just leave a bit of time for folks that might want to ask our group of experts on the call today about the challenge or any other specific questions regarding application to the challenge. So first, we'll have a brief overview of the challenge. A more in-depth webinar was already hosted, and you should have access to that. And we'll have information linking to that information at the end of the presentation. We'll share a little bit on why we thought to host this challenge between FAR and USDA, and then a little bit more about the research approach and program structure. And then we'll spend the bulk of our time discussing our frequently asked questions and then opening things up for Q&A. For those who are not familiar, I am Dr. Lakeisha Odom at the Foundation for Food and Agriculture Research, and I'll let my other two colleagues briefly introduce themselves, as well as my colleague Lauren, who you'll be hearing from throughout the presentation today.
Hi, good afternoon and good morning, everyone. My name is John Roethlisberger. I'm with the USDA Office of the Chief Scientist and have been helping to design this opportunity. Thanks. Appreciate everyone being here today.
Thank you.
And good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jody Williams. I'm a national program leader at USDA's National Institute of Food and Agriculture, also working closely with the development of this program.
Yeah.
And welcome, everyone. My name is Lauren Winstel. I am a scientific program officer here at FAR and supporting this challenge. So I'll pass it back to Dr. Odom.
Thank you. And you'll see all of our names on the RFA itself or in any questions and throughout the presentation. So these are the names, myself and Jody. If you have any additional questions about the RFA as you complete the process, we're the best points of contact for you. You'll likely also see information and reminders from Lauren, and John has also been designing a lot of this. So you'll see a lot of our names throughout this, but just so you can put a face with the name as you're sending information and questions. Next slide, please. So as you'll note, for the dialogue, you will be able to insert any questions or comments in the chat or the Q&A throughout the presentation. So we'll continue to encourage you to include any chat questions you might have in the Q&A or chat. We will be monitoring both. We have a short presentation, and then after that, we'll review and go through all the questions that have been submitted. We will make sure that there is adequate time at the end of our presentation. And also, we will record this webinar. We're recording now, and we will share it with registrants via email following the call. So if, for example, you don't quite remember what someone said or a timeline, etc., don't worry. This has been recorded. All the information is also made available on the landing page. Next slide, please. So before I transition over to my colleague, John, I just want to give a quick overview of why we decided to move forward in this space of innovation. So both FAR and USDA in the last couple of years has gone through research strategy assessment. And for example, the Foundation for Food and Agriculture Research, or FAR, for those less familiar with us, we build public-private partnerships, we connect funders, we work with researchers and farmers, all to provide every person access to affordable, nutritious food grown on thriving farms. And we have a set of priority areas. You can find all of that information on the website for the RFA. And we want to make sure that the proposals submitted do align with those priority areas. USDA Also, within their science and research strategy, seek to foster equitable and climate smart food and agriculture economies that protect and improve the health and nutrition and quality of life of all Americans, as well as yielding healthy land, forest, and clean water, as well as looking at how to help rural America thrive and feed the world. And we want to make sure that the proposals also accelerate disruptive innovation and are aligned with those priorities. So the goal of this is that FAR has focus areas and interest in both, as well as USDA have focus areas in innovation. And we want to ensure that we have created a funding opportunity that really supports that. The other space that we really want to focus on is food and nutrition security. We recognize that achieving nutrition security is complex and global, and solutions must simultaneously not only address nutrition security, but also address climate and social equity. And that's why the purpose of the RFA is to address the nexus of these three areas. We recognize that agricultural science innovation should enable more climate smart, nutritious, and equitable food systems, as well as investments in science accelerate that development and deployment of agricultural solutions that benefit producers, communities, and the planet. So that is why we designed an RFA within our both of our organizations that support inter and transdisciplinary teams focused on innovations for nutrition security that can catalyze transformative breakthroughs that are not readily accomplished through traditional research themes and funding programs. And as you'll hear John describing the project and the goals and program objectives, you'll see that consistent theme that we want projects that are pushing innovation, that are sitting at the nexus of the three theme areas that we've identified, that really look at disruptive solutions and really want to focus on kind of the future and innovation in food and ag nutrition. I'll now pass things over to John to share a little bit more about the themes.
Thanks, Lakeisha. Really appreciate that introduction. So successful proposals for this opportunity will address these three intersecting themes that you see here. We are looking for those disruptive breakthroughs that will make a tangible difference in nutrition security within the United States and with benefits globally, potentially as well. So our three themes are: first, bolstering food and nutrition security with an eye towards human health, of course, recognizing those strong linkages between nutrition and health. So within this theme, we're looking for projects that develop novel, nutrient-dense, safe, high-quality foods, work that can also help to support nutrition education and the targeting of precision nutrition for individual health benefits. So that's our first theme. Second theme is driving climate smart solutions. So these are projects that will help to mitigate and adapt to the impacts of climate change, in particular as it relates to threats and risks to nutrition security. Some examples include work related to agroforestry, conservation agriculture, crops that are able to resist drought, and the related topic of water management. We include livestock management as well in considerations related to climate smart agriculture. And you can see the rest of the list there related to decision making and the prevention of food loss and waste. And of great importance for all of these projects is to have a strong nexus with advancing social justice, equity, and opportunity. So as part of any successful proposal, there will be a recognition and plan for overcoming systemic inequalities and by way of developing innovative tools, platforms, and technologies that support underserved communities. So in short, we are looking for those most groundbreaking, most innovative projects that sit clearly at this nexus of nutrition, climate, and equity, depicted here with our Venn diagram. We'll go to the next slide. And on this slide, we're just giving a few examples of potential areas of interest. These examples are not meant to be confining at all. We're not indicating with these examples any preference for these specific sorts of projects. It's just meant to give a quick thumbnail sketch of the types of projects that we've envisioned that would sit at this nexus of nutrition, climate smart agriculture, and advancing equity and opportunity. So you can read through these just to mention a couple of things here. One example could be projects that optimize nutrition security while at the same time providing benefits for climate adaptation and providing greater access to affordable, nutritious food. Another example is looking into unconventional food sources. What are those streams of agricultural products that can provide for nutrition, even as we see a changing climate, and we're striving to provide equitable, affordable access to high quality food. As we face increased extreme weather events, projects that help to stabilize access to nutritious food in the face of those events, while also taking into account the interactions with poverty and inequality that may affect nutrition and health outcomes, and tied back to climate disruptions. And then just one last example, optimizing nutrition security through real-time data that's provided to either consumers, producers, processors, that's used in food chain supply systems, that helps to address deficiencies that exist in the ability to apply precision agriculture or livestock monitoring, or address supply chain logistics in a way that benefits human health through precision nutrition, reducing the loss of food, and increasing labor efficiency. So those examples and several others are laid out in the request for applications. Again, just want to make the point that these are merely examples. We'll go to the next slide and talk a little bit about the structure of the program, focusing here on eligibility requirements. Applications are welcome from a broad range of organizations: domestic, international, for-profit, nonprofit, academic institutions, as well as government research agencies, federal, state, local. As we just talked about, applications must focus on this nexus of nutrition, climate smart agriculture, social equity and opportunity, environmental justice. A key point here is that the primary applicant must be an early career scientist. So this would be the principal investigator or the team lead. And we're defining an early career scientist here as someone who has received their PhD within the last 10 years. So the date that is fixed after which the team lead will have needed to receive their PhD is July 29th, 2014. So 10 years from the reply due date or the submission date for this opportunity. We're very interested in proposals that identify compelling ways in which there are new connections being made across disciplines, across areas of expertise, from entrepreneurs to producers to community advocates, in order to advance agricultural innovation. As one of the things that we want to emphasize we're looking for is that applications that identify these new connections, these connections with the high potential for productive innovations, there need to be letters of support from those who are collaborating. We need to make sure in proposals that all parties who are cited as potential new connections are aware that they're being cited in the proposal. And then we'll look briefly at a couple more parts of the program on the next slide here. The project duration is up to 2 years, so 24 months from the award date. The total amount per award is between $300,000 and $500,000. We are very much encouraging the identification of matching funds to amplify the efforts that are proposed. However, matching funds are not required for this opportunity. The number of awards that we anticipate making will depend somewhat on the final budget that we have available and the overall quality of proposals. The number we're looking at right now is up to 4. And the date for expecting to receive funding for those proposals that are selected is this fall of 2024. And with that, I'm going to pass it to Lauren to talk a little bit more about the details of the proposal.
All right, so this is a list of the application components you'll need to submit. These include a pre-recorded narrated abstract, which I'll talk about a little bit later, a project description and project approach, a budget narrative and budget justification, and project key personnel, as well as a data management plan. And I do see that Lakeisha's raised her hand here, so we'll get.
I wanted to clarify, there was a mistake and it's repeated here, but it has been corrected in the application that the project description and approach are 1,500 words. And this is just a holdover. It was not 1,000 words. It's been updated in the RFA itself, but we used previous language, which was not updated. So I know there were a few questions in Q&A about that discrepancy. So I didn't want us to continue the presentation with that same discrepancy. So just acknowledging that it is 1,500 words total for the project description and approach. And you should see that in the online application updated. Thank you.
All right. So again, and this list is of the full required and optional components can be found in that published RFA on FFAR's website. So you can find more details there. So next we have some application submission guidelines. This is just a reminder that those applications must be submitted through FFAR's grants management portal. Sometimes you'll hear it called Blackbot or BBGM. You're required to use this portal because applications will not be accepted via email or any other format. So if you are planning to submit, we encourage you to create that account as soon as possible to begin familiarizing yourself with the portal prior to that deadline of July 29th. And this QR code on the screen is just that landing page that we have where you'll find the RFA, the link to the application portal, and all the other information we've talked about today. So next we have the video upload process. So once you're in that portal, one of the key components for submission is the narrated project abstract that I mentioned earlier. So this should be a 3-slide, 3-minute narrated presentation. Those 3 slides should include a description of the project and the challenges that it addresses. Should then describe the proposed disruptive solution, and then expand on the potential impact of the project if successful. So that file format should be PowerPoint, and the size limit is 200 megabytes. Our grants team increased that size limit to prevent any potential issues, but if you do still run into problems, feel free to reach out to our grants team at grants@foundationfar.org, and they're available to answer any of your questions as well with issues with the portal. So next we have the review criteria. There are a lot of words on the screen, but the main categories are that novelty, innovation, and originality, then impact and outcomes, technical merit and feasibility, and then partnerships and project team. So you can see the specifics of the review criteria on this slide, but they're also in that published RFA on FFAR's website as well. And next, finally, we have a very high-level timeline here. So as a reminder, that application deadline is July 29th. There will be a multi-stage review process throughout late summer and early fall. Then awardees will be announced in mid to late fall, with the awards start dates projected to be winter 2024. So with that, I will pass it back to John for some frequently asked questions.
Okay, thank you, Lauren. I want to note that we have a full list of FAQs on the FAR website. You can access those using this QR code. But we did want to touch on a few topic areas that we've been getting a lot of questions on. And also, I see that we have a number of questions that are appearing live here in our Q&A box. Please keep those coming. And our responses to these questions that we'll share in just a moment will just help to get your wheels turning as you continue to type in any additional questions in real time. So let's first look at some questions that mostly pertain to eligibility. We have received several questions from folks who are working on their PhD and who may not have yet received it. We want to emphasize that the time frame during which your PhD must have been officially conferred. Again, this is for the principal investigator or what we call the team lead in the RFA. The window of dates is you need to have received your PhD between July 29th, 2014 and the anticipated funding award date of September 30th, 2024. So it's not the date of the defense for the PhD, it is the date, the official date on your transcript when the degree was conferred. Also related to eligibility, there's questions about whether or not federal scientists, those employed by USDA or other federal agencies, can be the PI. And yes, they can, as long as they meet the other criteria, specifically the early career scientist criteria. Are certain institution types encouraged to apply? Yes, absolutely. Minority serving institutions of higher education are highly encouraged to apply. There have been questions about what definitions we're using for those minority serving institutions, and what we're using are those that are used by USDA's National Institute of Food and Agriculture. And to see the specifics of those definitions, we have links to the definitions that the National Institute uses on our online FAQ page. So we ask that you refer to those. Next, we want to look at questions surrounding international membership and leadership of teams. So I see that we have a number of international participants on the call today. Welcome. The question here is, are international institutions eligible to apply? Yes, they are. Successful proposals will clearly demonstrate potential benefits to U.S. agriculture and food systems. So the emphasis on benefits depicted in the proposal needs to be on U.S. agriculture and food. And then we, of course, see there being benefits and ripple effects more broadly, but the proposal needs to clearly speak to those benefits for the United States. Does the principal investigator or team lead have to be a U.S. citizen? No, that's not necessary. And there is no minimum number of U.S. citizens that are required to be on any team. And reiterate that we need to see that compelling case for how the project will benefit food and nutrition security in the U.S., as well as sit at the nexus of the three themes that we've talked about a number of times previously. We've had questions about other funding considerations. So how do we plan on taking into account matching funds? And can you apply if you've received funding previously from the Foundation for Food and Agriculture Research? So if we go to the next slide, we'll see our responses for folks to follow along. So on the matching fund point, if there's two projects that end up ranked equally in all other respects, and we have to make a decision about which one of those projects would advance, it will be the project that has the most substantial matching funds that will go forward for consideration in the next stage of the review process. So first we rank based on merits without consideration of matching funds. And then if we have tie-breaking situations, we look to the matching funds. That's how we're taking that preference into account that we indicated in the RFA regarding matching funds. If you've already received funding from USDA or FFAR, of course, the work that you propose that would to be funded through this RFA may not be duplicative of work that's already funded. However, you are eligible to apply for this opportunity as long as the work that's being proposed is new and different. And in cases where the additional funding that would be available through this opportunity would be used to accelerate and develop and go in new directions or explore new facets of ongoing projects. And we just can't have any sort of duplication or said differently, double funding of the same work. And then lastly, looks like we also have some carryover language here about the number of words in these different sections. So referring back to Lakeisha's point that it's the actual number is 1,500. There have been questions about the purpose of the narrated slide presentation. This is a really important part of the initial review of projects. So even though it's short and sweet, we are encouraging everyone to spend a significant amount of time and attention on preparing a really compelling 3-minute narrated slide presentation, because it will allow you the opportunity to first identify what challenge you're trying to address, propose the solutions that your project will advance, and describe their potential real-world impacts in a concise and compelling way. And then lastly, I think I've even seen a question related to this in those that have come in during the webinar today in our Q&A box about what are the special requirements around a stakeholder engagement? What does that mean? One of the things that's essential for this, for successful projects here, is that there are plans and there is at least one convening of a group that will benefit from the innovation that's being proposed, that's held, that helps to inform the work of the research team, as well as make the community that will benefit aware of, or a subgroup of the community that will benefit aware of the innovations that are being developed through this project. Does it have to be an in-person meeting? No, not necessarily. We're looking for innovation, we're looking for creativity, and pushing the envelope of what stakeholder engagement is with this project, just as we are looking for that creativity and that expansive thinking with all other aspects of this innovation challenge. So there is space there to think broadly about what stakeholder engagement could look like, and to propose that, to describe it in your application. So those are the questions we've seen a lot of that we wanted to highlight here. And let me hand it over to Lakeisha as we manage our real-time questions. Thanks.
This is the fun part. I'm so appreciative of the amount of conversation that's been happening. That means there are lots of folks that really want clarification, which is why we want this webinar to exist. So what I'll do is I'll kind of try to group some of the questions and answer them. So the first batch of questions that we had were specifically around the required documents for the proposal itself. So one of our first questions that I will take is around the required document. So someone in the chat asked whether or not the supporting letters of support, biosketch, current and pending support are required from everyone listed as key personnel, or only the sub-award recipients. And I would say everyone listed as key personnel, as they are a part of your team, but you may not be sub-awarding to them. But we would still need anyone that you're considering a part of your research team to have that supporting documentation. Someone asked for our international applicants. Do institutions that apply from other countries outside the US have to have an office or bank account in the US as an exclusive requirement? No, that is not necessarily a requirement that we have. You do have to be an eligible entity to receive funding. So some sort of nonprofit, federal agency, like you do have to have some qualifications for your credentials, but not that you have to have a US bank account. There was another question around whether or not awardees or grantees were able to have multiple sub-awardees, and the answer is yes. You just indicate that in your description. Let's see, we got a couple more here, and then I'll transition to the next group. Wait, I think this one might be a good question for Jody. Would an application be considered if it included a public information or education component with a nutrition expert, for example, i.e. science translated into layperson language?
So it could potentially be appropriate. It depends on the details of what is being provided. I think a better way to answer that question would be if you emailed and provided some additional details, and then I could potentially say it's a good fit or not. It's kind of general as the statement is written. So yes, it could be appropriate, but in order to give you a better idea, it'd be probably best to email me with a little bit more detail.
Mm-hmm. So we have a specific question about FFAR's match requirement. So there were a couple of questions around would USDA personnel be able to include their salaries, equipment, and facilities as in-kind contributions? Would externally funded grants or contracts count towards significant products or scholarly activities? And then what examples of match would be preferable? What I'll ask Lauren to do is include FFAR's match policy. You'll also have access to it in the RFA itself, but within that provides quite a bit of guidance around what FFAR considers a match. And the other thing that you can do, just as Jody indicated, is if you're unsure, please reach out to me. I can connect you with our grants team, or their information is included on the RFA, and then they can answer specific case-by-case basis questions around what may or may not count as match. I think that John clarified a number of the questions we have around external international partners and whether or not they can apply and whether or not the project has to be implemented in the US. There's another interesting question. I'll pose it to either John or Jody around whether or not it would be desirable for the main PI, who is an early career scientist, to have strong interdisciplinary research backgrounds that connect climate, nutrition, and social science, or is it acceptable for the main PI to be an expert in one of those fields and lead a team with strong interdisciplinary background?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think either of those models would work well. So an early career scientist with that interdisciplinary background could be successful. Someone who's more focused on one of the three themes and brings together, builds a strong team, and develops and evidences science leadership skills to work across disciplines in an interdisciplinary fashion could be just as successful.
We do have a clarification, and I apologize. I think when we got the initial feedback that the project description and approach section had an issue in it, they combined them into one. And so you have 1,500 words for only the project description and approach. So I just wanted to reiterate that and apologize. We had different information, we consolidated through additional feedback, and I apologize if we have been more confusing. What I will commit is that we will add this information to the FAQ, and make sure that that information is correct on the FAQ as well. And if there are any questions we don't get to in this next 30 minutes, we'll also add those questions to the FAQ list. And so then we'll be able to answer those. But if there are any questions you don't feel are completely resolved, again, our information will be at the end. Please reach out to us individually, and we will definitely have conversations with anyone that may have additional questions. I want to make sure, let's see. So we have quite a bit of comments around the project description. We appreciate it. Someone asked if we could increase it to cater to both sections. What we can do is talk with our grants department, but I will say the intention of this proposal is to be short and focused, right? And we recognize that asking folks to be brief is sometimes a bit of a challenge, but the goal is to have sort of almost like a pre-proposal for this section. And then for those projects that are sitting in that nexus and addressing all of the components of the call, we would have an in-person interview process, which would allow more elaboration. So I think there's a concern I'm reading in some of the comments that you may not get to explain your project in full, but that will be the case if invited to full proposal. So recognizing that brevity really is like, as John indicated, be clear and sharp and concise, but recognize that we may not have extensive amounts of space. We want to make sure that we can have the goal of this call is also to be quite responsive and not take several months to finish the process, which means that this first set of submission of proposals needs to be a little bit more succinct. And so we recognize that sometimes that is a bit frustrating, but we also recognize that we do believe with the addition of the video as well as the follow-up interviews, we will have the opportunity to get as much information about the project as possible. So I think that those were most. There was one question around whether or not a private company that collaborates with research institutions may apply as the primary. And yes, that is an eligible entity at FAR, so it will be an eligible entity. And so I would say, yes, you can be, but also recognizing that you need to have a team that meets the other components of the call. And before I transition to the next set of questions, Jody or John, is there any other clarification you'd like to share before I transition to the next bulk of questions?
No, I don't have anything.
Okay, perfect. These are easy. Some of these are easy. So there was one question around whether or not there is a sponsor RFP or solicitation number. There is not. I think that there were a number of questions around the confusion around the word count. We apologize again for this. Someone asked, do project roles need to be reiterated within project description text if they're entered at the beginning? And I think, John, you had already addressed this, but I don't know if you wanted to share something else around like brevity and just ensuring that you don't have to reproduce the same information throughout the document.
That's right. And I'll also apologize for having those numbers wrong in one of the questions that we responded to. And Lakeisha, thanks for that clarification. We really are seeking brevity and just clear, focused information about the idea. We're not asking you to get into a deep literature review or extensive description of all of the details that would need to be addressed to move the project forward. We're seeking to find ideas that are in this space of the intersection of nutrition security, climate smart agriculture, and advancing equity. And then we'll, as we identify those ideas that have the greatest prospect for additional consideration, then we'll work with you to get into those details as we move through the follow-up stages of this process.
Jody and John, there was another question around letters of support. So we had a couple of questions before around like who needs to have a letter of support. So we had one more, so I thought it might be worth bringing it up again. Someone asked if institutions with key personnel considered committed partners, do they still need letters of support?
Yes.
Yes, absolutely. So just to reiterate, anyone that's listed as a member of your team or key personnel would need a letter of support. I would also go further enough to say that we don't necessarily have a particular format for that. We aren't asking for a 5-page letter of support. We just want to indicate that whoever is a part of this team is acknowledging their role within that team and recognizing that they are supporting this effort. All right, let's see. We've done that one. We have a few more. Okay. So they wanted to know if a milestone is presented in a table, i.e. a Gantt chart as an attachment, does that count towards the word limit? That's smart. I would say it doesn't count toward the word limit, but also if you give us 50 attachments, that's really not meeting the spirit of the brevity of the proposal. So I would say if you'd like to submit a table as one attachment, that makes sense. But if you want to kind of fold all the information that you can't fit into your proposal into the attachment, I would not recommend that be a great strategy. Because we definitely want to try to adhere as much as possible to the word limits and the page limits of the proposal. John or Jody, any thoughts on this question as well, or does that feel sufficient of a sufficient response?
Agreed, that's sufficient.
Makes
Yeah.
sense.
Okay, thank you. Though I know you talked about this, John, in your FAQ, we did have another question around elaborating on the expectation of the convening. So it might be helpful to just provide a little bit more context around that, as we had a couple of questions in the chat around this convening component.
Yeah, so I think I'll say again that we're looking for creative ideas here. Um, we also recognize that there's value for the traditional stakeholder meetings or convenings within communities around a topic. But that is a way that by making that a requirement within the request for applications, we're encouraging thinking about how the projects that are proposed will directly benefit communities and asking innovation teams to roll up their sleeves and get involved with those communities that have the potential to benefit. So not putting any constraints or specifics out there of what that engagement looks like, but we do expect to see clear and intentional thought represented in your proposal about how you will engage with a community or communities that stand to benefit from this innovation.
Mm-hmm. We had a question maybe for Jody, which is the main focus nutrition and food, or would a field-based agronomic study be considered? I think I already know your answer.
Yes, they'll still be considered. There's also another question around livestock with a very similar feel to it. Yes, all those are considered. If you have specific areas of interest that you want to reach out to us and ask us, is this particular area appropriate? You're more than welcome to, but we are not limiting we're not limiting anyone to any specific areas.
Because we had a couple of other questions around cattle feed additive. I think that still addresses that as well. I think there was a question around, is there any percentage of indirect cost? FAR has a 10% indirect cost. You'll also see that in the RFA. If you have any additional questions about that, I would encourage you to reach out to our grants or our grants information, to our grants team, and that information is included on the website. Let's see. Making sure. There's a question around the match requirement. Another one, does the 50-50 cash in kind ratio requirement still apply for this proposal, even though matching funds are encouraged rather than required? No, because we do not necessarily require a match, it's only encouraged, then we would not necessarily have to have that same ratio, but you would have to show some documentation of the match that you are providing. And again, that information will be included in the RFA. And then if folks want to know like what counts as a match, though I would say it still has to be a non-federal match for it to count for FAR. So I wouldn't encourage folks to try to match, like if you have NIFA funds or DOE funds, that wouldn't necessarily count. But if you have any other kind of match that is non-federal, then absolutely. And again, if you have any other questions, Lauren put the match policy in the chat for everyone. And we'll also make sure that it's in the FAQs and it is also in the RFA. So there are lots of opportunities to understand what that match looks like, as well as our grants team is always on the ready to answer any questions regarding whether or not something would be considered a match. Let's see. There are a couple of questions again around eligible entities. And we would say that we do not have a restriction for companies or small businesses to apply for this, as they are typically in the realm of what is eligible to apply for FAR funding. If you have any specific questions on a case-by-case basis, though, I would recommend reaching out to FAR, our grants team, or myself to answer those questions. And another concern around the inconsistencies, absolutely correct. We are fixing those, or we have resolved those. Are there any other questions in the chat and the Q&A, Jody, that we haven't kind of addressed that you think it'd be great for the group to see, John and Jody? Trying to make sure I've covered most of them.
I think you have, oh, there's a question about the goals and objectives, and that's in the chat. It just popped in.
Oh, thank you.
So just on, I think on the word limits.
Oh, thank you. I'm not saying, would you mind just, is it
Yep.
can you explain more about the goals and objectives and how many words should we have, including milestones 1 and 2?
Yes, that's it.
That is in the RFA, y'all.
It is. It's 500.
It is. It is. So I would highly recommend driving you towards the RFA itself, so that you can see all the questions around word counts and everything of that nature. Any other questions that you see in the Q&A, John, that we should pull up? We have about 8 more minutes or 12 more minutes together.
I think we'll just state again, because there are a couple of additional questions that have come in recently about what institutions are eligible to apply, what's the geographical scope. The international institutions outside the US are eligible to apply. So the challenge is a global opportunity. To state again, additionally, the projects need to have a clear benefit to US agriculture and food systems.
I saw a good one that I almost missed, so I apologize. There's a great question around, should the impact of the proposed project be realized within the 2-year period, or is it okay for the research to lay the groundwork for future additional innovation? I'd open that up to John, Jody. Any thoughts on this?
Absolutely. It can certainly lay down the great groundwork for future innovation.
Absolutely. That was a great question too. So thank you for that. Someone else asked, it's another question about match, but I'll go ahead and resolve it. Would funding from other government sources count as a match within FAR? Absolutely. So FAR's definition of match, which you will see in the match policy that Lauren shared, as well as within the RFP, counts anything that is non-US federal. So state and local dollars count as match, international entities and government funds would count as match. Private sector funding counts as match. So funding from other government sources external to the US would count as match. Other government sources within the US would still be considered federal, and that would not count as match. I think we answered the question on direct costs. Just making sure I'm sweeping everything. Is there anything else in the chat I missed, John or Jody?
Lakeisha, there's a question about the project start date and if it could be January 2025, or if the project must start as soon as funding is awarded. So as you saw in the timeline, the award date is anticipated to be, announcement date anticipated to be late fall, early winter 2024, award date shortly thereafter. The clock starts for the 2-year performance period when the dollars are awarded. And that may be shortly before this January 2025 date that's in the question. So just recognize that that's when the clock starts and it's a 24-month period after the dollars are awarded. Lakeisha, if you have any other clarification on that, please
No,
weigh in.
perfect. But I will say that someone in the Q&A provided a really great suggestion. So I'm going to express appreciation. And they asked, will we edit a slide to provide the sections and word counts that will be on the final submission platform, as we have had some discrepancy, and we will absolutely do that. So thank you for that recommendation. We are happy to do that, and we'll share that. As we noted, the recording will be shared, and what we can also share with every attendee, and we can update the FAQs to have that information included to reduce the number of discrepancies. So happy to do that, and thank you for making that suggestion. All right, I think that might be, unless we see anything else, I think the majority of the other questions, um, that's interesting. We just got one that said, can the project support the creation of a for-profit company? I'm stumped. I'm stumped. This is my initial reaction, and John and Jody, because I love questions that stump me because it's something I didn't think about. I would say the focus of this is innovative research, but very often at times, innovation can then spur off to become its own company, but that's not the purpose of this call. So if through the design of this, you come up with this amazing innovative solution that 3 or 4 years down the line, you would like to monetize in some way, we wouldn't be against that, but I don't know that we would be seeking projects that are trying to create a for-profit company. Does that feel in line with USDA's perspective?
Absolutely.
All right, but that's a good one. Someone asked for the geographical scope of the call. I think we've reiterated, but I think it's valuable to say again, our eligible applicants can be from anywhere in the world, but we are seeking solutions that have benefit to U.S. agriculture. So while I wouldn't say that we have a specific geographical scope, we do have a focus in which we would like to see the successful applicants to this call will clearly link the benefit to U.S. agriculture. Even if the work is done elsewhere, we don't have a problem with that. We don't have a problem with non-U.S. entities conducting the work. But if you don't draw that clear through line back to U.S. agriculture, that is likely going to make your proposal a bit less competitive. Does that feel? Yep.
Absolutely.
Lakeisha, there's a question on validating the project scope to fully align with FFAR-USDA priorities.
Yes, I saw that.
I would just say that it is up to the project director to make that justification within their description and that alignment. If you have questions or it's just not clear, it's really far out of your scope or out of your depth, you're welcome to, of course, email us and ask us. And we can say, it could potentially align or it doesn't necessarily align. But at the end of the day, it is still up to you to justify it within the actual project description.
Mm-hmm. In our last couple minutes, we had a question around the stage of innovation. So is early R&D okay? Absolutely. From our perspective, it is. As long as it fits in that nexus and addresses the themes that John described. And as Jody mentioned, aligns with, in some way, our FAR and USDA priorities. We don't have an issue with if it's early R&D, or if it's a little bit earlier than early R&D, or a little bit further than early R&D, but we just are looking for those innovative ideas. And then just to clarify, someone said everybody but the PI will need a letter of support. Yes, that way, that makes it easy. Let me see. I think there was a couple of other questions around supplementary figures. So I think what'll be best for us is to add an additional FAQ around that, since we've had 4 or 5 questions around what counts towards the word count, and also some lack of clarity around the word count, which again, humbly apologize for. Is the grant administrator the same as the principal investigator? It depends on your organization, honestly. Sometimes it is, and sometimes if you may have within your organization someone that is considered the grant administrator, or what's the other term they use, Jody? The AOR, the authorized organization. What's the R? Representative.
Representative, yeah.
Yep. So within your organization, it might be a different person. I'm assuming, maybe incorrectly, but if you're asking the question, likely you do not have one. But you might want to just confirm who would be that grant administrator. Within some nonprofits, the PI and the grant administrator might be the same person. Within other organizations that may have a structure that's different, it might be an authorized person, or your finance person, or your grant manager, or whoever manages those things. But again, for any question that you are unclear about, please reach out to us, reach out to FFAR Grants. All that information is on the RFA page, the landing page. We'll send all this information to you after the call. And I want to see if there are any final questions, anything else in the chat. We've got like 3 minutes. Yes, there's a question from someone saying if there are some questions around what is fully aligned to FFAR and USDA priorities, can they direct it to FFAR? You can direct questions to myself or Jody. I think we can transition to the next slide with our contact information there. So this is, so any questions you might have, and again, you'll see this recording, the information will be included on the RFA, the information will be included on the web page. So if you have any questions about whether or not something aligns, or whether or not something is a match, or anything that you felt maybe was not clearly resolved today, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. We've been answering these questions since the opening of the RFA. So we're happy to continue to answer them up until the closing of the RFA. I want to give John and Jody the last words, but I just want to thank everyone for your time and attention. Thank you so much for all of your questions. And I appreciate your sharpness in forcing us to catch the spaces where we should have been clearer. So we'll make sure that we do that. But I really just have nothing but appreciation for the excitement and the interest and the curiosity around this funding opportunity. And I recognize that that indicates that we'll have some really great proposals. So thank you so much for your time, your attention, your questions. They're all helping to refine and make our FAQ list even better. I'll turn it over to John and Jody for the last words.
Thanks. I'll defer to Jody for the last word. I do just want to say thank you so much to FFAR for their partnership in this work. We're so excited about this opportunity, and we can't wait to see the innovative, disruptive, and transformative projects that come in. We're so happy that there's strong interest in this opportunity.
And again, just thank you so much for the engagement. Looking forward to all the great proposals that we're going to receive. And again, reach out if you guys have any additional questions that we weren't able to clarify today. Look forward to continuing the conversation.